South Africa is Africa's most industrialized country. And it is of huge significance to Zimbabwe since it is our biggest trading partner. But it doesn't end there. When South Africa sneezes, everyone develops a cough, whether in the SADC region or on the subcontinent. I'm Guthrie Manyuki. Tonight on the program, we are discussing geopolitics and the impact that it could have on Zimbabwe and the region. And to discuss that with me tonight on the program is Dr. Prosper Chitambara. Dr. Chitambara, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Chitambara, we are seeing a growing tiff between the South African government and the US government. Firstly, it was the freezing of $400 million in direct aid to South Africa over the land expropriation bill.
Yes, yes.
But now we are seeing the expulsion of South Africa's ambassador to Washington. And we have also seen the withdrawal of Secret Service details to the son of the former American president, Joe Biden, particularly when he was visiting South Africa last week. And the US President, Donald Trump, said, of all places, he is visiting South Africa, where the rights are being trampled.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this tiff, given the significance of South Africa to Zimbabwe and the region, what is likely to happen if this thing is not controlled?
Well, I think it will have very far-reaching implications or repercussions on not only the South African economy, but also the rest of the SADC and the African economies, given that South Africa is the biggest economy on the continent, is the most industrialized economy, and also South Africa is the biggest trading partner of Zimbabwe. South Africa has been receiving a lot of investments, a lot of aid from the US government. So this could actually threaten, because trade between South Africa and the US has been growing. It remains strong, and any disruptions to that, any disruptions to even investments coming into South Africa from the US could affect the South African economy in very, very far-reaching ways. But I'm happy with how the South African government has responded, for example, to the expulsion of the ambassador, South African High Commissioner to the US. I think they've tried to downplay it, but also they've highlighted, the president has said that they will try to engage with the American government to resolve this issue in a very amicable way that will not further disrupt trade and economic and political ties and relations between South Africa and the US. But of course, even if there could be disruptions, even if there is a worst case scenario in terms of that, I think for South Africa they should be able to weather it to a very significant extent, to a very great extent, given their relations with the East. They're part of, South Africa is part of BRICS, and their trade, investment and economic ties with China, with Russia, with Brazil, with other BRICS member states remains quite strong. And we see the balance of economic power is actually shifting slowly away from the West to the East. So I think that relationship, that strong partnership could actually help South Africa to weather any storms that could arise as a result of worsening relations with the US. But of course, Zimbabwe could also be affected. We are already affected, obviously, by the massive declines in US aid funding, 83% decline in funding. And in Zimbabwe, we were relying a lot on US aid, especially in the social sectors. Last year alone, we received almost about 500 million, slightly more than 500 million.
522.
Yeah, yes, 522. Yeah, so an 83% reduction obviously means a significant financing gap, especially in critical sectors, health in particular, social protection, but also a lot of NGOs have closed or significantly downscaled their operations.
I'll go to that later.
Yes.
Just as a follow-up,
yeah,
South Africa, being a member of BRICS, they can be able to weather
yes.
the storm.
Yeah.
But Zimbabwe is not a member of BRICS.
Yeah, of course, we're trying to also
And
do.
Zimbabwe,
Yeah.
and most of the corresponding banks that we have are in South Africa.
Oh, yeah, now in South Africa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Given the debilitating effects of the sanctions.
Yes.
So, do you see a Donald Trump that is likely to revise his ways, given how other countries have actually reacted to the trade war? Do you likely, are we likely to see Donald Trump relenting and saying, okay, we've got to revise these ways and heal the reefs of Africa? Are we like to see that, given what he's doing currently?
Well, I think it's like I think Cyril Ramaphosa is a diplomat. Is a very good diplomat, and I think they'll try their level best to normalize the situation, or to not to let the situation get out of hand. So I think they'll try diplomatic means to try to resolve the issue in a more amicable way, which doesn't have very adverse externalities, especially on the economy. I'm sure they're mindful of that, and that's why I think they've refrained from being too critical of what has been happening. I think they want to give diplomacy probably a chance, and I'm sure very soon we're going to see some high-level meetings between South Africa and the US to try to resolve the impasse. But of course, also I think the influence of Mr. Elon Musk doesn't probably help matters. Well, I think a lot of the policy influence really is coming from probably Elon Musk. Yeah.
So South Africa could be in a position to weather the storm.
I think South Africa definitely.
But then could it be a situation of with Zimbabwe?
And what I'm also seeing with South Africa is that I think this is also galvanizing the South Africans. I think they are unifying around that common position of South Africa first. Even Malema has been quite vocal and critical of the current US government policy. Yeah, so but of course the government, South African government, has been a bit diplomatic. Yeah, they are not too vocal, because of course they know they're in government. They know the implications could be severe. Especially if the US imposes sanctions on South Africa, I think that will make things very difficult, because it means even trade between South and not just the US but also the rest of the Western world will become very, very difficult. Even capital inflows into South Africa will become very difficult. There will be a lot of red flags on doing business with South Africa. So I think if sanctions were to be imposed on South Africa, I think definitely they'll feel the pinch. But I don't think we'll reach that stage. Yeah. I think they're going to resolve the issue sooner rather than later. In my view, I'm a bit optimistic.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk in the second segment about Zimbabwe and all these orders that have been announced by President Donald Trump.
Yes.
Please join us in the second segment as we continue to look at the geopolitics and its impact on the Zimbabwean economy. Welcome back. This week we have Dr. Prosper Chitambara, a renowned economist and leading academic, discussing the decisions that have been made by by the U.S. government rather, with regards to South Africa and the growing tiff between our biggest trading partner and neighbor and the U.S. government. Of course, we're going to be talking also about our very own economy. Dr. Chitambara.
Yes.
The freeze on some of the funding to Africa by Donald Trump has triggered, mixed reactions.
Yeah.
But with specific emphasis on cutting expenditure by the U.S. government,
yes,
particularly in Africa. He has been the USAID funding.
Yes.
Do you believe that it was the right thing to do, given that a lot of people are actually saying that But it's time for Africans to be accountable
Yeah.
and to make sure that they run their own affairs without having to rely on outside help or aid. What's your take?
I think it was always inevitable, and for me, it's a wake-up call to Africa. It's one of the issues that we've always been raising with government, that we need to assume greater responsibility towards financing our own development, in particular key sectors such as healthcare, social protection. Because donor aid is never sustainable. Yeah. Any change in a government like we have seen in America, can actually change things. And that obviously has negative repercussions on aid receiving nations. Mm-hmm. So I think what has happened was inevitable. It was always going to happen. Even in Europe, we're also seeing a lot of pressures because of a number of countries, European countries, right-wing governments have emerged and gotten into power, and they are cutting back on foreign aid. And also, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war has not helped matters, because a lot of the European aid is going to Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that has made things very difficult. And for Zimbabwe, it leaves us in a very difficult situation. It leaves a huge hole of financing deficit or gap, especially in health. At a time when our health sector, not just our health sector, our social sectors are in a palace situation. They've suffered from chronic years of gross under-capitalization and under-investments. And of course, the donors were helping to fill up the gap, or that financing gap. So I think it means government has to then do more. The Minister of Finance has introduced a number of taxes that are earmarked to the health sector. But we're also hoping that even the other taxes that were introduced this year should also help to bolster the financing of health, in particular the fast foods tax. I think that one, my view is that should be ring-fenced also to health, given that the consumption of fast foods is one of the biggest risk factors for non-communicable diseases. So I think it's a wake-up call for not just for Zimbabwe, but for Africa in general, to be more responsible for the health, for the well-being and the welfare of our citizens. So I always give the analogy of a father who relies on the father next door to feed his children or send his children to school. It's not right. Yeah.
The Minister of Finance,
in America, they also have their own problems.
Sure.
And now there's a lot of pressure for efficiency gains. Trump has actually introduced the Department of Government Efficiency, and I think they've made significant gains over the last few months that they've been in power. And obviously, those gains are going to go towards enhancing the welfare and the well-being of American people. If you go to America, there's a huge house crisis. A lot of people are homeless. They're also having their own problems. So I think there's also pressure for Donald Trump to do something about that, because charity must begin at home.
I was watching The Context on BBC
yes.
last night, where they were talking about all these things.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the Republican guys was actually saying that he's simply implementing what he promised to do during the campaign.
Oh, yeah, yes.
And so they're saying we have really...
I think so far he has done it very well, very faithful. He's been faithful to his promises, to his manifesto.
Zimbabwe received $522 million last year.
Yeah.
Directly from USAID. And the Minister of Finance this week said the money which came to the government directly was $200 million.
Oh, yeah.
And with the taxes that he has actually introduced, he's able to raise about $600 million US dollars. Yeah. So what is supposed to be a big hole to fill, he said that it can be easily dealt with, in the coming months. And so Zimbabwe, is in good stead to deal with those issues.
I think I agree with the minister. I think especially this year also, even with the good rains, it means the economy is going to expand more. If we grow by 6%, I think that will avail more resources, both in terms of direct tax revenues to government, but also in terms of increase in incomes, per capita income levels, which should actually leave us in a better state. So I think for this year, we are not in a very difficult situation, but I think it just means that we need to do more going forward. Government, I know, is trying to establish a national health insurance scheme, which essentially seeks to guarantee a basic health package for every Zimbabwean. And probably they're going to use some of the taxes that they've already introduced, including also the sin taxes, to capitalize and to finance that national health insurance scheme.
Then people are, they're happy to be taxed as long as it goes
to
all these things. Isn't
it goes to health, yeah. That's even the situation in the Nordic countries. The taxes are on the high side, but you actually see the benefit of the taxes through free healthcare, free advanced healthcare, free tuition for every student from primary up to university level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Turning back to the issue of the Zimbabwean economy and the current liquidity crunch, a lot of people have actually said the government's decision to maintain, a tight monetary policy stance through this central bank is now having unintended consequences, such as promoting the wider use of the US dollar at a time when we should actually be promoting the ZEG. So do you believe that?
I actually believe that, yeah. We've seen
all right, let me,
anecdotal
let me give
evidence.
Let me give you enough time to deal with this in the final segment. Please join us in the final segment as we wrap up this week's program with Dr. Prosper Chitambara. Welcome back. This is the final segment of this week's program. If you're just joining us, we are at the tail end of the discussion where we've been talking about the impact or likely impact of the worsening tiff between US and South Africa on the Zimbabwean economy and the region, as well as other decisions that have been taken by the US administration as it promotes its America First mantra. And we have been with Dr. Prosper Chitambara right from the beginning. And we are concluding now. Dr. Chitambara.
Yes.
People have said the government's decision through the central bank of maintaining a tight monetary policy is now having unintended consequences, such as promoting the wider use of the US dollar at a time when we should be really be increasing our pace in de-dollarizing.
Yeah.
Why do we have to continue with this tight monetary policy stance if this is having this unintended consequence?
And that's the challenge now, those trade-offs that are now emerging in terms of the tight liquidity situation. Yes, it has had a positive impact in terms of moderating the chronic inflationary trends and developments that we saw, especially last year. This year, things have been a bit stable. And obviously, because of that tight liquidity situation, we're seeing a further dollarization of the economy because the ZIG are simply not available. So I think it's something that we may need to tweak that policy. Because I'm not sure the government has resumed some of their major infrastructure projects. I've been seeing the roads. It seems the roads project are still on hold, and probably what government wants to do is to sustain this low inflationary environment for a bit of time, so at least people's expectations are probably programmed towards that stability. Because expectations, in most cases, they do influence economic development. So if probably they want to sustain this for maybe 6 or 9 months, then probably they may change course once people's expectations have been stabilized and programmed around that low inflationary trajectory and virtuous cycle.
But then how do you promote the ZIG? Because you are now dealing with the issue of people having become accustomed.
I think the challenge,
to the USD.
The challenge with government, in my view, or the central bank or the Minister of Finance, remember, it promised to consult stakeholders, economic agents, and unveil a clear de-dollarization path with clear benchmarks. And obviously that has not been done. But if it had been done, would be knowing that probably by end of this year, probably part of the fuel will now be sold in ZIG. And then by probably end of next year, the passports will now be also be available in both ZiG and and USD. So I think without that plan, I think it creates a lot of uncertainties, which, in my view, are not good for a sustainable economic and macroeconomic environment.
Because you see, what you're telling me here,
Yeah.
without actually saying it,
Yeah.
is that there's a tight leash
Oh yeah.
on the circulation of the ZiG
There is, yeah.
to manage inflation.
So the idea is really to manage inflation.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
is it the best way of running the economy, really? When it's supposed to be made of supply and demand?
No, it's not. So we are now actually in austerity. So it then affects investments in other critical sectors, even healthcare. We're talking about healthcare. So it affects a lot of things actually. So I think there's need for a balance, but of course, attaining that balance requires, I think, a lot of consultations with stakeholders and partners.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, because we are where we are, and people are seeing the wider use of the USD
yes.
in the economy, which is, people are actually saying probably it's at 95% now.
Yeah.
So what does this do when the government eventually decides that, okay, this is the path? What does it do to that path of de-dollarization?
I think the path of de-dollarization, as far as I'm concerned, no one really knows about that, probably except a few cabinet ministers, or probably it's only the Minister of Finance or maybe the President. So I think that's why there are those uncertainties in the economy around the issue of the currency. You really don't know whether government, maybe in the next 3 months or 6 months or in the next year, they are going to say, no, we are now de-dollarizing. But maybe that at least among within the market, in the economy, there's consensus that let's sustain stability first before we can talk about eventually de-dollarizing. So that understanding that is there in the economy. But I think it's good for the minister to consult widely on the de-dollarization roadmap and come up with clear benchmarks for mutual accountability. It also helps in terms of ensuring there's transparency. And, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Quickly, we have seen that under this tight monetary policy stance regime, we have seen most formal businesses, particularly in the retail sector, going under serious distress.
Yeah.
And we have also seen other companies within the manufacturing sector beginning to feel the squeeze.
Yeah.
And obviously that makes their goods very uncompetitive.
Uncompetitive, yeah.
So for how long can they sustain these things? Because we are seeing the impact of that already.
I think it's going to already. I hear the Minister of Finance talking about some tax reforms to try probably to bring a bit of relief. Because also the tax environment has not helped matters. It has compounded or further exacerbated the challenges that were already there in the market. And we see a lot of businesses actually struggling to remain afloat. Yeah. So I think from what I'm hearing, I think there is that urgency now to try to probably address some of the concerns, especially around the issue of the tax, as a way of bringing a bit of relief to businesses that are struggling. A lot are actually applying to be placed under judicial management under the weight of so many challenges, both on the currency front side of things, but also even on the tax side of things. So the minister is mindful of that, and I think I hear something is up. They're trying to do something about that.
Okay.
Also, the TNF has been seized with these matters. The tripartite negotiating forum, which brings together government, labor, and the business.
And they are meeting actually tomorrow, right?
They're meeting tomorrow.
Yes.
I think last month we also met and we did some presentations on the state of the economy and some of the drivers of competitiveness and what's limiting against Zimbabwe attaining high competitiveness and high productivity levels. So I think tomorrow they're also meeting. But tomorrow they will be focusing on the formalization. The government has come up with the formalization strategy to try to incentivize the formalization of the informal economy.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Tonight, we'll leave it here.
Yes, sir.
Always a pleasure having you around, Dr. Chitambare.
Thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure having you tuned into this program. Every week, between 8:30 p.m. and 9 p.m., on Thursdays. You give me the energy to go on. You give me the desire to keep on, keeping on, and keeping on. Good night.